Part 1. There are moments in life that seem completely ordinary until years later, when we realize they changed everything. For Ethan Carter, that moment began on a quiet summer afternoon in a small seaside town where time appeared to move slower than anywhere else in the world. Seabrook was not famous for luxury hotels or crowded beaches. Instead, it was known for its peaceful streets, colorful fishing boats, old stone houses covered with ivy, and breathtaking sunsets that painted the ocean in shades of gold and crimson every evening. Most people came to Seabrook to escape the noise of everyday life. Ethan came for an entirely different reason. He was a professional travel photographer whose work had been published in magazines across the world. His camera had taken him through frozen mountains in Iceland, crowded markets in Morocco, endless lavender fields in France, and rainforests in South America. Millions of people admired the beauty he captured through his lens. Yet behind every award-winning photograph stood a man who had forgotten how to enjoy life. 3 years earlier, Ethan had lost the woman he loved in a tragic accident. Since that day, the world had become strangely colorless. His photographs remained beautiful, but they no longer carried the same emotion they once had. He continued traveling only because staying in one place reminded him too much of everything he had lost. When his editor suggested documenting the coastline of Seabrook for a new travel magazine, Ethan accepted without much thought. To him, it was simply another assignment that would keep his mind occupied for a few more days. He rented a small wooden cottage overlooking the sea. Every morning he woke before sunrise, packed his camera equipment, and spent hours walking along the cliffs. The scenery was extraordinary. Waves crashed endlessly against dark rocks below while white seagulls floated effortlessly above the water. The air smelled of salt, pine trees, and freshly baked bread drifting from the local bakery. Everything around him looked perfect. Still, something was missing. On his second evening in town, Ethan noticed a young woman sitting alone on an old wooden bench facing the ocean. She remained perfectly still, holding a small notebook in her hands without writing a single word. Unlike the tourists who constantly searched for the best place to take photographs, she seemed completely unaware of the beauty surrounding her. Instead, her attention was fixed on the horizon, as though she were waiting for someone who would never arrive. Ethan instinctively reached for his camera. For years, he had photographed strangers, believing that the most honest emotions could only be captured when people forgot they were being watched. But this time, something stopped him. Photographing her somehow felt wrong. There was a quiet sadness surrounding her that deserved privacy rather than attention. The following morning, he saw her again. She was sitting on the same bench at nearly the exact same time, wearing another light-colored coat despite the warm weather. Once again, she stared toward the endless sea with the same thoughtful expression. On the third day, she returned. Then on the fourth, it slowly became impossible for Ethan to ignore the strange routine. Every afternoon, almost as if following an invisible schedule, she arrived carrying the same notebook and remained there until sunset before silently walking back into town. Curiosity began replacing indifference. He found himself wondering who she was. Why did she always come alone? Why did she never seem to speak with anyone? And why did she always leave with tears quietly drying on her face? The answers came unexpectedly one rainy afternoon. Heavy clouds covered Seabrook, forcing visitors to seek shelter indoors. Ethan wandered through narrow streets until he discovered an old bookstore hidden between 2 centuries-old buildings. The shop looked untouched by time. Wooden shelves reached the ceiling, every corner filled with novels, journals, maps, and books whose pages had turned yellow decades earlier. The peaceful silence inside felt comforting. As Ethan browsed the shelves, the small bell above the entrance rang. the woman from the bench stepped inside. Raindrops glistened in her dark hair as she carefully closed her umbrella. She looked around with familiarity, greeting the elderly bookstore owner with a warm smile that suggested she had visited many times before. Unlike the sadness Ethan had noticed from a distance, there was kindness in her expression. She carried herself with quiet confidence, yet her eyes revealed someone who had experienced far more heartbreak than most people her age. The elderly bookseller disappeared briefly into a room behind the counter before returning with a small cream-colored envelope tied together by a faded blue ribbon. The young woman's hands trembled ever so slightly as she accepted it. She held the envelope as though it contained something infinitely more valuable than money. Ethan watched from a distance, without understanding why such an ordinary letter could stir so much emotion. Only after she had quietly left the bookstore did the owner explain the story that almost no visitor knew. Every summer, on exactly the same date, the young woman returned to Seabrook to collect another letter written by her father before he passed away from a terminal illness many years earlier. Knowing he would not live long enough to guide his daughter through adulthood, he had written a series of letters for her future. Each one was meant to be opened 1 year at a time, offering advice, encouragement, and reminders that love continues even after death. For 12 consecutive years, she had returned to that little bookstore to receive the next letter. She had never missed a single one. The bookseller admitted that nobody knew exactly what those letters contained. They belonged only to her, and she never allowed anyone else to read them. Something about that story remained with Ethan long after he left the bookstore. For the first time in years, another person's life had become more interesting than his own grief. That evening, he walked toward the cliffs earlier than usual. The sky had cleared after the storm, leaving behind an extraordinary sunset. Orange light spread across the calm ocean, while gentle waves reflected the colors like liquid gold. The young woman was already sitting on her familiar bench. This time, the envelope rested open beside her. A gentle smile appeared on her face as she carefully folded the letter and placed it back inside. She looked peaceful, not because life had suddenly become easy, but because someone she loved had somehow found a way to stay with her, even after all those years. Without realizing it, Ethan remained standing several meters away, watching the ocean in complete silence. For the first time since losing the love of his own life, he no longer felt completely alone. He could not explain why. Perhaps grief recognizes grief. Perhaps lonely hearts always find each other. Or perhaps destiny had quietly begun writing a new chapter neither of them expected. That sunset marked the beginning of a story that would eventually change not only Ethan's future, but also everything he believed about love, loss, and second chances. Neither of them knew that the remaining letters still carried one final secret, a secret that had been waiting patiently for 12 years. And before the summer came to an end, that secret would bring two broken souls together in a way neither of them could have imagined. End of part 1. The following days passed with a quiet rhythm that neither Ethan nor Amelia had planned, yet both had begun to expect. Every morning, Ethan continued photographing the coastline, but something had changed. His camera no longer searched only for landscapes. Instead, it seemed drawn toward small moments that most people would overlook. A child laughing while chasing seagulls, an elderly couple holding hands after decades together, fishermen helping one another pull heavy nets from the sea, and sunlight dancing across the water just before dusk. For the first time in years, he found himself looking for stories rather than perfect pictures. Amelia continued visiting the cliffs every evening, always carrying her notebook and the latest letter from her father. She never rushed through its pages. Instead, she read every sentence slowly, allowing each word to settle in her heart before closing the envelope once again. Although they rarely spoke, an unspoken friendship quietly began to grow between them. Sometimes they simply watched the sunset together in complete silence. Other evenings they walked along the beach without feeling the need to fill every moment with conversation. Their shared silence never felt uncomfortable. Instead, it carried a strange sense of understanding, as though both of them recognized pain in the other without needing explanations. The people of Seabrook soon noticed the change. The local cafe owner smiled whenever Ethan ordered 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. The elderly bookseller watched with quiet satisfaction each time both young visitors appeared in the store within the same hour. Even the fishermen along the harbor joked that the photographer had finally stopped taking pictures only of waves. For the first time since arriving, Ethan began to feel less like a visitor and more like someone who belonged. One cloudy afternoon, Amelia invited him to explore the oldest lighthouse, standing at the edge of the peninsula. The lighthouse had guided ships safely through storms for nearly 2 centuries. Its white walls had survived powerful winds, endless winters, and countless waves crashing against the cliffs below. Inside, every wooden stair creaked beneath their footsteps. The higher they climbed, the wider the view became. From the top, the entire coastline stretched toward the horizon. Tiny fishing boats looked like floating leaves, while the town itself appeared peaceful beneath the afternoon sunlight. Standing there, Ethan realized how small every human problem seemed compared to the endless ocean. Amelia had always loved this place. She explained that her father used to bring her there when she was a child. Whenever she felt afraid of the future, he would point toward the sea and remind her that even the roughest storms eventually passed. Those memories still comforted her. Yet there was another reason she kept returning. Every annual letter seemed connected to a different place in Seabrook. One year, it encouraged her to sit beneath an old oak tree overlooking the harbor. Another year, it instructed her to walk barefoot along the beach before sunrise. Another asked her to climb the lighthouse and remember that hope always shines brightest during darkness. Her father had somehow transformed the entire town into a collection of memories, waiting to be discovered one by one. Ethan found the idea remarkable. It was as though a man who knew his life would end had carefully planned a way to remain part of his daughter's future. That evening, as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, Amelia admitted something she had never shared with anyone else. For many years, she had believed those letters would eventually tell her exactly how to live. Instead, they had taught her something entirely different. They reminded her that no one, not even the people who loved us most, could make our choices for us. Eventually, every person must decide whether to continue living in fear or begin living with hope. Those words stayed in Ethan's mind long after they left the lighthouse. He realized he had spent 3 years doing exactly the opposite. He had continued breathing, continued working, continued traveling, but he had stopped truly living. Over the following week, their friendship deepened naturally. They explored hidden beaches known only to local fishermen. They visited small art galleries where paintings captured the changing moods of the sea. They shared quiet breakfasts in cafes overlooking the harbor and spent evenings watching stars appear one by one above the water. Without either of them noticing, laughter slowly became more common than silence. Even Ethan's photographs began changing. His editor called after receiving the newest collection of images. The difference was impossible to ignore. The colors appeared warmer. The compositions felt more intimate. Most importantly, the photographs once again carried emotion. The editor congratulated Ethan on producing some of the finest work of his career. Ethan accepted the compliment politely. Secretly, he knew the photographs had improved because something inside him had changed. For the first time in years, he was seeing the world through hopeful eyes. As summer continued, Amelia received another letter. Unlike the previous ones, this letter left her unusually quiet. She spent hours sitting alone beside the ocean, without opening her notebook or looking toward the horizon. The peaceful smile Ethan had grown accustomed to seeing disappeared completely. Instead, uncertainty returned. The following morning, she walked alone through the cemetery, overlooking the sea, carrying the letter tightly against her chest. From a respectful distance, Ethan watched her place fresh white flowers beside her father's grave. She remained there for nearly an hour before slowly returning toward town. Although she never spoke about what the letter contained, Ethan sensed that something important had changed. Several days later, the elderly bookseller accidentally revealed what Amelia had been struggling to understand. Her father had written that love should never become a prison built from memories. He warned that many people spend their lives protecting old heartbreak so carefully that they never allow new happiness to enter. He encouraged her to stop waiting for perfect certainty because it would never arrive. According to the letter, real love always required courage. Those words affected Amelia more deeply than any previous message. For years, she had avoided serious relationships, convincing herself that no one could ever understand the life she had lived or the grief she continued carrying. Now, for the first time, she wondered whether fear had quietly become the very thing preventing her from moving forward. The same question haunted Ethan. Late one evening, he sat alone outside his cottage, looking through old photographs stored on his laptop. Thousands of images filled the screen. Magnificent landscapes, historic cities, extraordinary people. Then he reached the folder he had avoided opening for 3 years. Inside were photographs of the woman he had once planned to marry. Instead of overwhelming sadness, he felt something unexpected. Gratitude. He finally understood that loving someone deeply had never been the mistake. The mistake had been believing that losing one great love meant life could never offer another. He closed the computer. For the first time since the accident, he whispered goodbye. Not because he wanted to forget, but because he was finally ready to remember without allowing the past to control his future. The next morning, sunlight filled Seabrook with unusual warmth. Tourists crowded the harbor, children laughed along the beach, and fishing boats prepared to leave before dawn. Everything appeared exactly the same as it had weeks earlier. Yet for Ethan and Amelia, nothing was the same anymore. Without speaking the words aloud, both of them had begun to understand a truth neither had expected. Some people enter our lives to help us remember who we used to be. Others arrive to show us who we can still become. Neither of them realized that summer was almost over. Soon Ethan would have to leave Seabrook. And hidden inside the final unopened letter waited a revelation powerful enough to force both of them to choose between the safety of their old lives and the uncertainty of a future they had never imagined together. Summer faded almost unnoticed. The mornings became cooler, the evenings arrived earlier, and the sea carried a stronger wind that reminded everyone the seasons were changing. Tourists slowly disappeared from Seabrook, leaving behind quiet streets that once again belonged to the fishermen, shop owners, and families who had lived there for generations. For Ethan, the end of summer meant the end of his assignment. His return flight had already been booked. His editor expected him back in the city within 3 days, where new projects, new destinations, and another year of constant traveling awaited him. Only weeks earlier, leaving would have felt easy. Now, for the first time in years, the thought of saying goodbye filled him with uncertainty. He had arrived in Seabrook, believing he was simply photographing another beautiful coastline. Instead, he had found something he never expected. He had found peace. More importantly, he had found someone who reminded him that life could still surprise him. Amelia sensed the same approaching farewell. Although neither of them spoke about it directly, every shared walk along the beach, every sunset, and every quiet morning seemed more valuable than the one before. Both understood that time was running out. On Ethan's final evening in town, Amelia received the last unopened letter. For 12 years, she had waited for this moment. 12 summers, 12 envelopes, 12 messages from a father who had somehow continued guiding his daughter long after his own life had ended. She carried the final letter to the familiar bench overlooking the ocean. The same bench where Ethan had first noticed her weeks earlier. The same place where an entirely new chapter of both their lives had quietly begun. The sunset was unlike any they had seen before. Golden light stretched across the calm sea, while gentle waves reflected the sky like polished glass. Everything felt peaceful, almost sacred. Amelia opened the envelope with trembling hands. Unlike the previous letters, this one was noticeably longer. Its pages had yellowed slightly with age. She began reading slowly. Her father wrote that if she was holding the final letter, it meant she had already become the woman he had always hoped she would be. He admitted that writing those messages had never been about giving perfect advice. No parent possessed all the answers. Instead, he simply wanted to remain part of her journey for as long as possible. He reminded her that grief was proof that love had once existed. Because of that, grief should never be feared. It should be honored, but it should never become a permanent home. Near the end of the letter came the words that changed everything. He wrote that if, during one of those summers, she met someone who made her believe in tomorrow more than yesterday, she should not let fear convince her to walk away. Life, he explained, was never measured by how carefully people protected their hearts. It was measured by how courageously they allowed themselves to love again. The final sentence was only a single line. It simply asked her to stop waiting. Amelia closed the letter. For several minutes she remained perfectly still, listening only to the waves below. 12 years earlier, she had believed those letters would eventually tell her exactly what to do. Instead, they had quietly prepared her to trust her own heart. She finally understood that her father had not been leading her toward a destination. He had been teaching her how to find her own way. As darkness slowly covered the coastline, Ethan joined her on the bench. Neither of them needed to explain what had happened. Some moments speak more clearly than words ever could. The silence between them no longer carried sadness. It carried possibility. That evening, they walked farther along the shoreline than ever before. The moon reflected across the ocean, while thousands of stars filled the sky above them. For the first time, neither of them thought about the past. They spoke about dreams instead. About places they still wanted to see. About books yet to be written. About photographs still waiting to be captured. About lives that had not yet been lived. By sunrise, Ethan had reached a decision. When he returned to his cottage, he opened his laptop and canceled every assignment scheduled for the following 6 months. His editor was shocked. Friends believed he had lost his mind. For years, Ethan had accepted every opportunity to keep moving, because standing still meant facing memories he wanted to escape. Now he realized something unexpected. He no longer wanted to spend his life running. The next morning, instead of driving toward the airport, he walked through the center of Seabrook. The familiar bakery had just opened. Fishing boats were preparing to leave the harbor. The bookstore owner was arranging new novels in the front window. Everything looked exactly as it had on the day Ethan first arrived. Only he had changed. He stopped outside the bookstore, where Amelia was helping the elderly owner organize a new shipment of books. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating tiny particles of dust floating in the air. The place felt warm, peaceful, like home. At that moment, Ethan understood something that years of traveling had never taught him. Home was never simply a place on a map. Home was the place where your heart finally stopped searching. Over the following months, Ethan remained in Seabrook. He rented a small studio overlooking the harbor and transformed it into both a photography gallery and a creative workspace. Visitors from around the world came to admire his images, not because they were technically perfect, but because every photograph carried genuine emotion. For the first time in many years, his work reflected happiness rather than loneliness. Amelia continued writing. Inspired by her father's letters and her own journey, she completed the novel she had struggled to finish for nearly a decade. It became a quiet success, touching readers who had experienced loss, hope, and the difficult process of beginning again. Although she never published the letters themselves, their message lived within every page she wrote. Years passed. The old bookseller eventually retired, leaving the little bookstore in their care. Together, Ethan and Amelia preserved it exactly as it had always been. Travelers often visited expecting only shelves filled with books. Instead, they discovered stories. Some written on paper. Others living quietly inside the people who walked through its doors. On warm summer evenings, they still returned to the wooden bench overlooking the sea. The notebook remained. So did the sunsets. Sometimes Amelia reread the old letters. Not because she still needed guidance, but because they reminded her how far she had come. One evening, many years later, Ethan placed a small wooden box beside her. Inside rested dozens of handwritten envelopes. One for every future anniversary they hoped to celebrate together. Each letter carried memories, dreams, gratitude, and promises for years that had not yet arrived. Amelia smiled before tears gently filled her eyes. She realized that love had come full circle. Her father had once found a way to stay beside his daughter after saying goodbye. Now Ethan was choosing to leave pieces of his own heart for every tomorrow they might share. The ocean continued rising and falling with the tide, just as it always had. Seasons continued changing. Years continued passing. Life remained beautifully unpredictable. Looking back, Ethan often thought about the afternoon he had almost taken a photograph of a lonely woman sitting on a bench by the sea. If he had lifted his camera instead of lowering it, he might have captured a beautiful image. But he would have missed something infinitely more valuable. He would have missed the chance to become part of her story. Sometimes people spend years searching for extraordinary moments, believing love must arrive dramatically, like lightning across a dark sky. But real love often begins much more quietly. It begins with a shared silence, a familiar smile, a walk beside the ocean, or a single decision to believe that even a broken heart is capable of beating fully once again. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The deepest love is not the one that erases the past. It is the one that gently teaches us the past can exist beside a beautiful future. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon one final time, the waves carried the same timeless rhythm they always had. Some stories end with goodbye. Theirs began there. The end.